Welcome back to Not a Strong Start, a podcast by filmmakers who talk movies, television, and synchronized Jason hats, but don't get the memo out to everybody. I'm your host. Daniel is a final girl. No, wait. Final boy. Final boy.
I am not your host. I said what I said.
And I'm your other guy. I'm still waiting for it.
So in this episode, we're going to talk about some of our horror movie hot takes. So stuff that we feel very strongly about, and maybe it's not the most popular opinion out there. So usually when we do these kind of episodes, we usually get people that are in our comment section. You guys are ready to get at us, and like, hey, that's why we do this. You can't get mad at us. We're just being honest, right? Is that fair enough?
Yeah,
I think get mad in the comments.
Yeah, no, please.
I would say it's a higher percentage than maybe that people probably will not agree.
Yeah,
exactly. George, we'll have you go first.
all right. I feel like you guys are going to be against me. I think that the Babadook is overrated.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Look at me in the eyes, George, and say this. Look at me in my cold, dead eyes, and you tell me.
I know you like the movie. I know that you're a fan of the film. Yeah,
very much so.
I watched it. I watched it twice, and it's not like I watched it and I was too young. It's like it's within my adulthood now. It came out in my 30s. And it's like it's not bad, but like people talk about this movie like it reinvented horror for some reason. I was like, nothing happens, and like and I just can't get behind. Like I feel like with some good horror films, there's usually some sympathy for your characters, right? Like there's characters that you're rooting for, and to some extent, and generally how it should be.
Like Freddy.
Like Freddy, I'm always on his side, exactly. But you're not supposed to root for the monster, right? You're supposed to be rooting for the mom and for the kid and stuff like that. But the mom is such a bitch. Like they just, and it's like, I'm sorry, I can't feel for this mom even at the end who doesn't care for her child. Like it annoys the crap out of me that this person just has no motherly instincts and has no maternal anything about her. She just, maybe there's something to this that a woman connect with, because it is written directed by a woman and everything. But typically it's the man who is painted as the one who has no connection with the child, and when the mother dies because of childbirth, then the child suffers from that because they're like, you remind me of the death you killed your mom, and that kind of stuff. I felt like that was put onto this child from the mom, and it was just weird. It's like, no, at the end of the day, like, this is your kid. Like, you should just be caring for your kid. Like, why don't you care for your freaking son? Like, yeah, it annoyed the crap out of me. So in turn, every time someone's like, Babadook is the greatest. Yeah, F you, man. F you.
You know what? F you. That's what you scream at them when they're walking off.
I would give you this. I enjoyed the Babadook. I think it's a good movie. If I were to sit down and write a list of top 10, top 20, maybe even top 30 horror films for me, it wouldn't be on that. I think it's a good movie. I don't think it's absolutely a masterpiece or anything like that. So it'll be a while before I get to the Babadook if I'm naming my favorite horror movies.
That's reasonable.
I will give you that much.
That's reasonable. It's just I see it on top 10 lists. Like, that's what annoys me. It's like, it's not top 10. No.
No, I agree with that. I agree with Jose's sentiment on this. If we're talking within the last like 10, 12 years, because I don't remember when it came out. I feel like it came out in the last 10 years, I think, right? About ish.
Maybe just outside, but close enough.
Yeah, but like 10, 12 years. So I think of the horror movies that came out, I think it's more in the top 20 horror movies within that window frame. But of all time, like the 70s, man, the 80s, like the 90s, like we had so many good horror movies that like I don't even think a lot of the more modern horror movies are as good as a lot of those. Now, we do have some that are breaking the the barrier, and like, oh man, like Talk to Me is phenomenal. I love Talk to Me.
We
have some really exactly. It Follows, like there's some really good ones there. But if you're ignoring all the other ones and all the amazing movies that came before, sure, Babadook is more higher up on there. I'm a fan of Babadook. I like the fact that they took a different approach in this, where it was the mom, because it feels like she's going through the heartbreak, sort of like with Hereditary, where they take a woman that's going through depression, a woman that's facing a death and is kind of overcoming all these emotional things, and the monster becomes representative of the despair that she's going through. I like that. I like that the son was even retaliating and dealing with his own thing, where even the movie kind of portrays, since it's kind of through her point of view, we're seeing it that he looks like a little asshole and he's, doing this. But when you deal with children, the poor kid's just lashing out and like seeking attention. I mean,
And
I
he's
feel bad
autistic.
for the kid.
He was an
And he's
autistic kid. He was
exactly. And he's autistic. So I know what you mean. So I'm not defending your take on this at all. I don't think it's a top 10 horror film of all time. I would, completely disagree with that. But I liked it a lot. I think it's good. I think the Babadook creature design is really cool. The sound effects and things they kind of add to it is pretty cool, and how they kind of, how they kind of set up the horror. The good thing that I like about this one, it's not a jump scare movie. It feels like they kind of get you with the horror through the sound effects and stuff. So they use the technical aspect of filmmaking really well, which is why I like it. But again, having said all that, no, it's not my top 10 or top 20 films of all time of horror movies.
And I see what you're saying about the mom. But I kind of like that aspect, not because I liked the character, because I don't think you're supposed to like the character, at least the way the character was presented. But I liked because it gave us a different nuance of a mother character that we don't often get. Like you said, it's usually a little bit different the way that it's portrayed. So it added a little bit of a different dynamic than we usually get with it. So as a viewer, I did like that because it gave me something a little fresh. And it's something like, not all parents, and trust me, someone coming from the field, not all parents can handle, what comes with having, a child with special needs and needs extra attention. And it's sometimes really, really rough. So, in that aspect, I like that they gave us a different view of what can possibly happen. I think torture porn movies are the worst kind of horror movie that there is. Out of all the subgenres of horror, I think torture porn is the worst. Not only for me is it not entertaining, I think it's cop out horror. It's horror without nuance. It's most of the time not gonna rely on good story or rely on atmosphere or creating tension. It's more about like how much can I shock you, how much can I disgust you to make you look away from the screen, and that's it. It's most torture porn is a one trick pony. So I don't find them entertaining, and I don't get excited when I see one coming out as much as I see some bad horror movies, and I'll be like, "Hey, I'll check that out." Torture porn horror is probably the only one where I'm like, probably not gonna check that out.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So I feel that's probably one of my least favorites of the horror movies, but there have been good ones like Audition. Like I've mentioned it before on our podcast. I love Audition. I think it's solid. To me, with torture porn, because like I know like the Terrifier movies are kind of like that too, right? I haven't even seen the
Yeah,
Terrifier movies. I don't have an interest in watching them. I'll try to
yeah.
give it a shot eventually, just because I like to know what the hype is to see if it's good, but it doesn't really do much for me. The only props I'll give it is the prosthetic design makeup artists. So when it comes to stuff like that, I feel like they get to show out and they get to show, hey, look what the hell I can do. So that's why when you watch stuff like, Hostel, and you see like the eyeball and how
Yeah.
they're doing things, it's more like showcasing the talent of the visual effects artists, because so many of them have been wanting, grew up getting into that to do gruesome monster makeup. And instead, because of the era that we're in now, they're doing, reality shows makeup. They're not doing the stuff we want. You know what I'm saying? Like we don't do enough prosthetic horror movies anymore. So many things are CGI. So many things are psychological horror movies now that I unfortunately SFX artists they don't really get to shine
Flex.
that
Don't
much
get the
anymore.
flex, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm a lot with you on this one, Jose. I'm probably a little bit more forgiving because I guess I'll give like a part one a chance. And generally, I find the part ones are the most decent versions to watch. Like we mentioned Saw, Hostel. The first Hostel I actually still kind of enjoy to some extent. But when you get to like the sequels of like a part three and part four, it's just like, all right, now you're just like Jose said, you're just trying to like tear people apart just for the sake of tearing people apart. Like at least the first one's attempt to give you a setting that makes sense and give you some kind of dynamic that's reasonable for why we're here. but by the time you get to the umpteenth version of like Human Centipede, it's just like you just want to sew people's butts together. Like, okay, I get it. You just want.
They're like,
First of all,
no,
don't
let's
we
do
all?
30
Don't we
people.
all? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, that's a series I haven't watched because it's like I get what you're trying to do, right? This is two girls, one cup of horror. I don't want to see that. I'm fine.
And I don't usually, like I said, most of the time, like I don't know if I want to watch that, but you know, I will here and there at least give the first one. I watched the first Human Centipede. That was enough to tell me I do not need to watch another one.
Yeah.
I watched the first Terrifier. That was enough to tell me I do not need to watch another one. I just saw the trailer for the newest Terrifier for our Stay Tuned episode October, which is out. Feel free to check it out and see what's coming out for the rest of the month. But I saw that one and I was like, I didn't see the second one. Damn, things have escalated, but it just seems a lot more of the same from the first one, just to a umpteenth level. And I'm like, that's I don't know, I don't I feel I prefer horror with a little more nuance to it, where you're not gonna try again to just like shock me. Like torture porn, it's the jump scare of horror. That's what it is. Where it's like it's not a real scare.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start off with the banger one, okay? Stephen King should not be labeled as the king of horror. You know, he's labeled like the king of horror for the books and movies that he does. He should not be the king of horror. All of his dramatic pieces are much better than his drama, than his horror movies. So like Stand By Me, The Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption, even Misery, that's more of a thriller than it is a horror, but even if you want to take that one out, are much better than the horror adaptations that we've seen of his movies. Not even close to me. He should be labeled more as a drama king because that's what the hell he does. Instead, he's labeled as the horror king, and it's like, all right, cool. But like a lot of his adaptations are not very good.
It's funny. We
Yeah.
actually talked about that
Did you?
on
Yeah, we
on that episode.
Damn.
Well, yeah, we mentioned that his best work is his non-horror work.
Yeah.
There you go.
But you know, with that though, Marie had said something important that I think is why he has the crown. And it's like there's very horrific moments in his dramatic things. So like you look at the Green Mile and she referenced the fact that it was horrific seeing this guy not have the wet sponge when he's getting electrocuted. And that was just a brutal way to die. You know, you think of Misery, how horrific is it to be hobbled? And they show the hobbling, you know, even like you think of Stand By Me and how horrifying is it for these young children to see a dead body, you know? So like there's still horrifying moments even in his most serious dramatic things.
Correct.
You know?
But that's what you have to have for drama, right? You have to have horrific moments in order to have the dramatic effects, which is still absolutely true. So the fact that he intertwines that, I think, is what makes it, you know, which is why it's a perfect blend of it. I just think the way that he describes his characters and the way he gets the dramatic characters, he's so much more than just what he's labeled as the horror king. I think, like, because you know, we're horror fans and we've seen very good high elevated horror movies, but for the most part, the majority of the horror genre is not higher elevated, fleshed out characters, right? It tends to be more, it's more like what we said, it's more shock values, more horrific images, it's more the audience watching it and they themselves placing themselves within the movie where they feel horrified by this. To get something with drama, you have to be it requires more of a calculated writer. You have to be able to flesh out your characters a lot more. And Stephen King is absolutely killing that. So when he has that, his characters are much better in his dramatic movies than they are in his horror movies. So even when we see a lot of his horror movies, a lot of the characters feel kind of flat. They feel kind of one tone. Even when we mentioned Thinner, right? Like that main character that we watch when we watch Thinner, he's very one dimensional. It's only going this way. That's it. He's an asshole until he's made to feel thin, and now he's trying to stop himself. That's it. There's like, what does this guy do on the Sundays? Does he watch football? Does he do fantasy baseball? I have no idea. I read nothing of this character beyond this guy's just telling us what he's feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Uh,
I get what you're saying, and I definitely agree to a certain extent. I think, I personally, I think the moniker comes off of just pure volume.
Yeah,
The volume of horror that he puts out, not only the volume of horror that he's put out in his books, but how much horror has been adapted into movies based off of his work. More volume than probably any other writer, at least that I can think of off the top of my head, of horror content comes from his work. So I think the
Yes,
moniker comes from that.
absolutely.
But if you're basing just off of quality, then yeah, the moniker would not fit.
I was gonna say you're also a person who is a fan of his writings. Like you read his books.
Mhm. Yeah,
Is there
absolutely.
someone else you would say is a better horror writer than him?
So there's other ones
Just
like you get
books,
like
not movies, just
yeah.
books.
Yeah. So
R.L.
you get like
Stein?
yeah, RL dude, third grade all day, homie. Yeah. No, man, like that's when you start getting into like the HP Lovecrafts. You start getting into like the macabre of things. So you have some writers that you have that go into really darkness of horror. It seems like the thing with Stephen King is since he's written such a large volume of books, he doesn't write very similarly like a Dean Koontz, let's say. Dean Koontz is very like you pick up a Dean Koontz book, doesn't matter what the damn story is, it reads the same. It's the exact same guy. He writes it the same way. Stephen King does kind of adapt and evolve with some of his writing, and you could tell even in the decades that Stephen King writes, his writing evolves and changes. But in terms of his darkness, like even when you take like the book It, you have the main character and he's talking to like essentially an imaginary turtle that came from space, like really weird, bizarre stuff. And you knew that Stephen King was dropping acid around that time. This dude was really into drugs. And when you read some of his books, it reads. So even with It, which we regard as probably one of his best, clearly one of his best horror film adaptation movies, projects, that book is really messed up and it doesn't revolve just more around horror. It's a lot of weird, almost there's too much of a heavy focus on the children in parts that I don't really want to explain that are
Yeah, yeah.
uncomfortable. And like
Mhm.
it's so it the horror comes more from the humans than it does from actually Pennywise, the monster. So it's you know what I'm saying? So it really depends how you define the horror writer, I guess. But H.P. Lovecraft is more true to the horror and the horrific of the visuals of the creatures and the monsters and things like that. So, George,
Mm.
hit us with another one. One that's gonna piss off our fans.
I feel like human, like some slasher films, the human killer, the single human killer, isn't scary to me, and I feel like it's a stupid premise. As
Mm-hmm.
much as I love films like Halloween and Friday the 13th or stuff like that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Scream is a better example. There's just something about it like I've never been afraid of, and I've never been like I've always been like, how is this a threat? That's the reason why I kind of liked the second to last Halloween film. And we've talked about it, where like there's that mob mentality of the town, and it's like, what are we doing? Let's beat the crap out of this guy. Let's be, you know, it's like, why doesn't that happen more often? Like, I would always get annoyed as a kid watching like the human dude kill this jock. It's like, dude, we just saw a scene where you took out like a bunch of dudes on the field with all your gear on. Just attack this guy. Like, come on. Like, why is he killing you right now? You're strong. That stuff would always just annoy the crap out of me. And it's still a trope. It's still a thing. It's like, why are we letting this a human is killing you right now with a knife? You could stop a knife. You could I mean, come on. So it's I'm not actually a huge fan of that trope.
For me, agreeing with you depends on how it's occurring. Like if you have someone that's just literally going at people and no one is fighting back and it's just a simple human, then yes, I'm right there on board with you where it's like gang up on this person. Like why are you doing it? That was one of my favorite parts of that movie where it was like finally a town is like, all right, 20 plus years, enough is enough.
Yeah.
Let's go take out this guy. Like that's it. I really appreciated that because I've wanted to see that more. Uh, but I feel if it's approached more in a cat and mouse, a pop out and hide like tactic, a sneak
Stealth is
attack type
fine.
tactic,
Yes.
and things
Yes.
like that. Like I feel there could be a creepiness to that because it's like you never know when they're gonna come, where they're gonna come from. So in there, even if it's a human killer, I can't agree because I feel it can work in that scenario. But if it's just a regular human just coming at you like the Terminator and no one's even trying to fight back, like you gotta at least try. I forgot what I was watching the other day. I was watching a horror movie and it gets it gets to the part where this person is surrounded by it was 30 days a night, and this person is surrounded by all the vampires, and it's like, all right, you're not making it out of this situation. Like,
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah.
Like, you're dead. All right. You can cry, you can yell, you can beg, or you can open your hand out and bitch smack one of them. He'll kill you. But in the end, you got a bitch smack. He's got all the other vampires know, like, damn, you let your food bitch smack you. Like, go out with something, with some kind of fight. So in that situation, I agree with you. It's not really scary if they're coming like the Terminator at you. And like in Scream, I never loved that part where they're tossing them against the wall, knocking them downstairs and everything. And it's like, you were able to just knock them on their ass. Like, why don't you try that again?
I think it's with those movies too, is by the end. Like when you cut like to 2/3 of the film, there's still a crew of people that are alive, and they found out it's like, all right, there's a killer, but then they disperse, or like or they'll still run away. Like if there's 3 of you and you're running away, like what are you doing? There's just one person. Sure, they got a knife. One of you might get stabbed. Just try to kill the guy. Like, come on, fight back. There's things you can do. I hate people just don't fight back and they run away.
Yeah.
Flank them, flank them.
Yeah.
It is. I agree with you on that. I think slasher films, I love some slasher films, especially the ones that we talk about, like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th and whatnot, obviously Halloween. We have some good screams in there. It got so overused that it got so played out. And it's just like it became one of my least favorite genres by the end, because it's just like there's so many bad ones. And how many times can you keep doing this? And there's just so much lacking of originality. They're the ones that always use jump scares a lot. And it's just like, I hate jump scares in horror movies because they're just not creative. Like, there's sometimes where they could be used if you're messing with the person's getting paranoid and whatnot, and it's playing more with like a psychological horror. If it's not, like, just stop using a jump scare, man. Like, use something else. With slasher films, it kind of feels the same way. Remember how they had that one, Jose, what is it? The one where the girl travels back in time. Remember
Happy
in the
Death
first?
Day.
Oh,
No, not that
no, no,
one.
no.
No.
It's the
Yeah,
the
it's on Prime.
yeah, it's on Prime, and she goes back in time to
Oh, I know
stop
what
the
you're talking
killer.
about.
Yeah, I didn't like that movie. Like, I watched it, and I was like, I didn't like it just because it
Totally
was like,
Killer. You know what it's called?
yes, totally
Right?
Yeah.
killer. Because it's like it's just wasn't original at all. Like, great that you're going back in time, but it felt like outside of getting the premise of how you're gonna pitch this movie, the lines, the dialogue, the feeling. Like, I've seen the 80s done way better. I've seen slasher films done way better. They didn't really do anything differently. Happy Death Day was a little more original, but it's because once you add comedy to it, I feel like that's how it can work.
Yeah.
When you just go pure horror, like,
Or
it just doesn't
or
work.
Freaky. I felt Freaky gave
Yes.
it a
Yes.
twist, and that was
See,
well
that
done.
was different. Yeah, that's adding an original concept to it. So that's, I think, is how you can do it, but it gets done so much. And then when they do it well, then they want to come out with like a part 2, a part 3, a part 4. Even with the new Scream, right? They had their new Scream revival, whatever, part 4 or 5, I think it was. And then all of a sudden it got like 3 more, and like now they're gonna do another one. It's like, Jesus, like, stop. Please
No,
stop.
it is true. And it's the same thing again. It's basically, all right, let's get a person. Let's try to find some kind of mask, give them a hoodie, or a robe, and then there's your killer. That's all they're switching is switching the mask, switching the weapon, and the setting, but it's the exact same process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Scream follows that to a T. The exact same thing. All right, Jose, what do you got for us?
All right. So I gotta say, I get the urge to
He's got one.
rewatch the Evil Dead remake. And I do tend to I watch it usually like once a year. I get the urge to rewatch that, but I never get the urge to rewatch the original. I just don't.
Dude, I had one that's kind of similar to yours,
Uh,
so I'm glad you're doing this. So good.
Yeah, I just don't get. And it's like I appreciate the original for what it is, but like if you were to put both in front of me and like which one do you want to watch, I'm choosing the remake. Like, that's the one I'm gonna choose to watch, and I think just how it did the horror aspect, it did that so well, and taking something that was turned into a joke in positive way, it turned a joke, it became a call and all that stuff, and it kinda leaned into it, but taking that and that same concept and then just turn it into pure horror, and it did that so well. It's more of a movie for me than as a new term that we learned in the episode we recorded, the splat stick. And I lean more towards pure horror than splat stick. So, and this is a main example.
That's fair. So what I had for this one was zombies weren't really scary until fast zombies. Once we got like those hyper movement zombies, that's when it became more horrific to me. Before that, you had the original, Romero zombies, but even when the sequel started coming, it completely went comedy because they had to go comedic. A lot of comedy added to this, so it became more sloppy, which is why the zombie franchise kind of, I don't really want to say died. It just became very B level. And that's where it stayed at.
It
So
was
when
a
they came,
Return, wasn't it? Return
yeah,
No,
that went
yep,
no,
like
no,
Return,
no,
comedy.
no, no.
No,
no,
Return
no,
of
what
the
is it?
Living Dead was not made by George Romero. That was made by John
yeah,
Russo, who worked on the first Dawn of the Dead, not the
We're
Living
just
Dead,
talking about
but Dawn of
zombie
the
in general. That went like
yes,
comedy. Return went
his did,
that
yeah,
that
yeah. But
yeah
his
Dawn of
yeah
the
did,
Dead was
yeah.
still serious.
Yeah. So
yeah.
so Return, exactly. So that's why when they started doing that, that's how they try to add a different, it's almost like, hey, we're in on the joke as well. Let's have fun with this. So that's the direction it went. But once we got Dawn of the Dead, once we got the 28 days later and you gave us like these kind of infection zombies type with these fast movements, that's when I felt like, okay, now you found the horror elements of these real zombies. This is now how it's horrific. Before it just felt just very B level. You know what I'm saying? That like the Blob almost. It was
See,
like
I'd argue in Return of the, and I mean, yeah, Return of the Living Dead, they ran. Those were running zombies,
yeah, they did.
and
They,
they
they
were
yeah.
hordes.
Yes. I'm not saying the remake of Dawn of the Dead invented that. I'm just saying the fast moving zombies, I think, is what added the horror, the true horror element, I feel like, to zombies. Whereas the slow moving one, they're just not as much of a
Oh, there's
threat. It's
nothing
the same.
scary. No, nothing
Yeah,
scary
there's
about a
nothing
slow. Yeah,
scary about it. It's like the one man slasher. Like Michael Myers doesn't run, dude.
yeah.
Jason
You
doesn't
could stiff
run.
arm those guys and just get out of there. You
Yeah.
could,
You could just run, man. You could just book it. Don't trip over something. You'll be all right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I will say Jose's though. I felt like it was a poke at me because we've talked about how much I love the Evil Dead franchise. But you know what, Jose? If we're talking just part ones, I will give it to you. I rewatched the remake way more than I watched the original Evil Dead. Evil Dead 2, though, I will pick over both. I will watch that over and over again. But yeah, that remake is just, it's chef's kiss.
It's chef's kiss, man. It was so amazing.
Yeah, and again, that's it's a subjective, it's a personal preference of levels of type of horror and what's going to rank above the
Yeah.
other,
Yeah,
and that type of horror for me personally is going to rank above Split Stick.
yeah. And it's a
That's
horror.
always going to
It's a
below.
horror film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay.
So,
All right. So I
wait,
was
I was
gonna
going to
do
say
that.
real quick
Yeah, yeah.
with your thing with the zombies, the next evolution is to actually kind of mix both worlds together. So have those zombie aggressive, those running aggressive zombies, but mixed from the original. If you remember in the original, those zombies will pick up things. They
Yeah,
actually
Yes.
tools.
that yeah, they actually
Yes.
had a self this thing to like preserve and not
Yeah,
die. They'll like try to get out of the way and things like that. So add that self-preservation plus the aggressive running and the
Yes.
ability to pick up tools and weapons. Mix
Yes.
those together.
And then
yeah.
fast forward, and then 10 years later, they're all picking up regular remedial jobs, working 9 to 5. Families gonna have to go home to it, pay the bills. No, wait, that's us.
uh,
All
I
right.
I thought Jose was gonna pull a Tremors, and it's like, and then they fly.
Ooh, hey, they drop from the skies and pick at us. Okay, so here's one. So this is a movie that I just watched. It's the rewatched Doctor Sleep. Okay, so
Okay.
Doctor Sleep, I'm a huge The Shining fan, and when I rewatched Doctor Sleep, I freaking hated every single reference and things that they brought The Shining back into, and even when they casted the actors, and even the last 30, 40 minutes, as I were going back to the hotel, it didn't need to happen. Like when I rewatched it, Doctor Sleep would have been so much better had it just been its own movie and it had no association with The Shining. They could have just done their own movie. And even if you still wanted to be the character of Danny, that's fine. But going back to the hotel, it didn't really make sense. Like, I get it. He wanted the creatures and monsters things to prey on this woman, but like, who cares? You could have done it in a different way. You could have done it better. It felt like it was too much of a, hey, remember this? Hey, remember that? It's like, yes, I do. That's the reason why I'm sitting here watching this movie. I watched The Shining and I saw an hour and 15 minutes of bullshit that has nothing to do with The Shining. So that to me kind of felt like false marketing again. Like, just sold me on a different movie. Like, you had, what was it, Rebecca Ferguson or whatever that was in it? Like, phenomenal in the movie. Like, she was good in it. You know what I mean? Like, Ewan McGregor was great in it. Like, they had good stuff going. Like, they didn't have to go with The Shining on this. And I understand it's based off the book, whatever. I don't care. I'm sorry. Like, I'm on the side that that Stanley Kubrick did better than the book did. Sorry. Sorry for listening to Stephen King. I love you, but I love the movie more. I understand whatever. So that's why with the Doctor Sleep, it felt like Mike Flanagan went too much trying to prod between both sides, where it's just like, dude, stick to the book because that's where you were going. Don't do the movie then. Don't touch the movie. If you're not gonna do it justice, don't do it. I was passionate.
Yeah, I'm not 100% against you either. I think the
Yeah,
first
okay.
half of the movie is what I like the most.
Yeah.
Once they went back to the Overlook, I was like, oh no, just let him conquer this challenge with his shine, with his ability,
Yes.
and then train the girl, like be her Professor X and help her
Yes.
become super powerful, and the two of you destroy this cult. Like that would have been the better ending, honestly. And like maybe he
Yeah.
dies and sacrifices himself in some way.
Yeah.
Like that would have been better
Yeah.
as opposed to going back. Like, okay, I get what you're doing. It's the member berries tactic, because his
Yeah.
story of becoming like this alcoholic who's trying to like deal with his shit. It's the repetition of what his dad was going through. It's like there was something good there, that his demons that he has to overcome.
Yeah.
But
It
yeah,
became too much of a distraction by doing that. And then, like, I get it. At the end, he's gonna use the boiler again and blow down the thing because that was the big issue that Stephen King didn't have, that Kubrick didn't do in the movie. So he's going back to right the wrong as a way to get Stephen King to like his version of the movie. I could tell exactly what the hell Mike Flanagan was doing. It was very obvious to me watching it. It was like, just don't, dude. Just do what you were doing. Just do it. Like, going back to the Overlook didn't make, and then it felt campy when they were there on the Overlook Hotel. Like, you could tell some of the CGI a little bit. Them on set felt like them on set. Like, it felt too colorful. Like, it just at all didn't look like it to me. It just didn't, it didn't work for me.
all
So,
right,
George.
one last one to piss people off, and now I'm gonna say why. Dog Soldiers is not even in my top 10.
Yeah, I agree. It's not even in my top 30.
Remember the world I
I,
come from, the
I
famous
haven't even
monsters
seen
world.
it.
Oh, there's a werewolf community that would hate us.
Rip our throats out. Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
This one's probably going to be pretty blasphemous for many people, but personally, I prefer Exorcist 3 over the original. I'll leave it
What the
at
fuck
that.
is this shit?
I
What the
haven't
fuck?
seen part 3 in a long time, so I'd have to see it. To me, Paranormal Activities, the marked ones, best one of the franchise. Don't care.
I agree 100%.
There you go.
I still haven't seen it
And
yet, so I don't know.
and we're a little biased. We're Latino, so there you go. You can watch it, George. On that note, thank you for watching another episode of Not a Strong Start. Please like, subscribe, comment, share on the YouTube channel, Not a Strong Start. You can listen to us anywhere you listen to your podcast. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter, Not a Strong Start. I'm your host. Daniel's the final girl. No, wait. Final boy.
I am not your host. I said what I said, Evil Dead and Exorcist fans. And you can find me at This Is Me Nombre on Instagram.
And I am your other guy. I'm still waiting for it. And you can follow me at Nicolopolis.